Welcome to this tutorial. My name is Ian and I will be taking you through the tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to continue with our journey with ChatGPT. Now in the previous tutorial, we looked at how we could easily summarize and aggregate our tables of information. But what if you wanted to now take that and you wanted to change the calculations you're doing? So instead of just totaling and summing your data, you might want to know, what is my average? What was my lowest value? What was my highest value? What is a count? What is a unique count? So we got these different types of calculations that you can bring into your data analysis. So we're going to be covering that in this tutorial. We're going to be taking you through some of these different methods of aggregation and showing you how you can easily apply them within ChatGPT. Now please remember, you do need a paid version of ChatGPT to be able to follow along with this. Please also remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and please keep up to date with all the latest content that we produce. But let's jump into the tutorial now. I will see you there. Welcome to this tutorial. So we're going to continue with our series of tutorials that we've been working with when we've been looking at how we're going to analyze our data using ChatGPT. In this tutorial, I'm going to be looking at some different methods of aggregation. In the previous tutorial, we saw how we could easily summarize our tables. We could calculate the total of our sales by our region, for example. And in this tutorial, we're going to be looking at how do we get an average, or how do we get the highest value or the lowest value? How do we get a count, for example? So these are things you're probably quite familiar with, using your spreadsheets, using different functions. You can use your equals min or your equals max or your equals average, and you can calculate those values. We're going to be looking at how ChatGPT can do that. Now, if you followed the previous tutorials, you will know that we're working with sales data at the moment. So basically, it's just a spreadsheet of sales data. It's about 8,399 rows of data that we've got of some sales. So the first step I'm going to be doing is we're going to upload this information into ChatGPT. Please remember, you must have the paid plan for this. And to be able to link a spreadsheet, all you do is you just use this icon and you select the file that you want to do. Now, in this case, what I'm going to just tell it is to load the file and list the fields. Basically, we're just going to look at it, loading the file and listing the fields so that we know that it can access the table and it can see the table of data that we want it to work with. Please note as well, when you see doing the analyzing at the moment, ChatGPT sometimes can take quite a long time over certain things. Sometimes it's quite quick. In the videos, we might sometimes speed this part up a bit just to get through it if it's taking a bit of time. That wasn't too bad. We've now got a listing of the fields. Now, as I mentioned in the previous tutorial, what we did was we got a summarized table and we looked at how we got the sales by our regions. So we're going to start with that. We're going to basically be using the same table. We're going to start off by just creating a table, and we're going to tell it to display the sales by the region. Also, we're going to do a bit of formatting. We're going to tell it to add a total, and we're going to format, and we're going to tell it to use thousands. We're going to tell it to format with 1,000 separators. And also, we're not going to have any decimal numbers for our sales values. Again, if you've seen the previous tutorials, you'll have seen I've used this command quite a bit. Okay, so there we go. It's going to start building our table, and it's got our region and our sales values. Okay, so as I said, that's what we did in the previous tutorial. However, what if you wanted now to add some new calculations? So maybe for each of the regions, you'd like to know what the average value was of each sale. So we're going to tell it we want to add a calculation to the table. We're going to tell it to add a calculation to the table. I'm going to tell it to calculate the average sale value for each region. Okay, so there we go. I'll ask it to add that calculation to the table. Okay, so starting to build out the table, and as you can see now, we've got the average sale value being calculated. Now, this can do several different types of calculations. One of the ones that you might want to do is you might want to actually compare what is your average value to, say, your median value. So let's tell it to add a calculation again to the table. And one thing to note, I'm just using this terminology, add a calculation to the table, and telling it what the calculation is. You might find by phrasing this differently that it actually works perfectly well. You might find that it may be a bit shorter. So we're going to tell it to do calculation. Get the spelling correct. There we go. That looks a bit better. Add a calculation to the table. And let's tell it this time to calculate the median sales value per region. Okay, again, we'll leave that to do its calculation. And you'll see now it will add that as a new column. And we now get the median sale value. So the median sale value is basically the middle sale value. Average is the total sales divided by the number of transactions. Okay, moving on with the calculations. So other types of calculations you might want to know is what was the highest value or what was the lowest value. So again, let's tell it to add a calculation to the table. And in this case, we're going to say add the highest value and the lowest value for each region. In this case, I forgot to tell it that we wanted the sales value. So lowest sales value for each region. Now, I might kind of guess we're using sales because in the previous table, well, in the previous calculations, we've been using sales. So it might well have actually gathered from that. And you're going to find that ChatGPT often actually does that, is it can imply things quite well. So sometimes you may not spell things correctly, or you might not put things in the correct term that you wanted, and often it actually figures it out. Okay, so there we go. And now we're going to get our updated table again. And as you can see, the new calculations just going to be added in there with our max sale value and our min sale value. Now, another type of calculation that we often do when we're working with data analysis is we often want to know what is the count of things. So how many transactions happened? So if you think about our spreadsheet, I said earlier there was 8,399 rows in total. So we might want to know for each region how many transactions were there. Also, what we have is something called the unique count. So often we might want to know how much of the values of something is there. For example, we have customers in our data set. Now, you may have the same customer who's done several transactions, but we want to now count the number of customers. So we want to know how many customers are there in the actual data set and for each region. So again, let's tell it to add a calculation to the table. I'm going to tell it to calculate the number of transactions and the number of unique customers per region. So a couple more calculations gives us a bit more different information there. Okay, so there we go. We've got our updated table. So hopefully the number of transactions should basically get to 8,399, whereas the number of unique customers should be 795 in total. So as you can see, there we go. Now getting those calculations. And it looks correct. One thing is it's not doing the totals for the other calculations. Could potentially tell it to see if we could get it to total those calculations. Okay, but let's move on. And the last calculation I wanted to show you for this tutorial is that maybe what we want to do is we want to use a calculation from within the table. So we got a total sales here at the moment, and we got our number of customers. So maybe what we want to know for each region is what is the average sale value for each customer. So what we want to do is we want to take our total sales value and divide it by the number of unique customers that we have to just give us a new calculation. So again, I'm going to tell it to add a calculation to the table. And in this case, we're going to calculate the number, well, we're going to say calculate the total sales divided by the number of unique customers for each region. Okay, so as you can see, got that calculation. Let's add it to our table. Okay, so this is interesting. So basically it says that it's got an error analyzing. And this is actually quite interesting when you watch the way that ChatGPT does this. And I'm quite happy it's actually appeared in the tutorial. And it will tell you what the error is, and then it will tell you sort of what it's trying to do in terms of the fact of trying to fix it. So it's saying the sales column is formatted with commas, which makes it unreadable as a numerical value directly. So what it's saying here is this is basically being displayed as text. So it's not seeing it as a numeric value, even though we're treating it as a numeric value. So what it's done then is it's going to correct the data format and then perform the calculation again. And you can see this time it's actually then got it correct. And it's actually quite interesting as you're going through the different data analysis, how often sometimes this happens where you see the error analyzing and how it's actually able to self-correct what is not getting right. But as you can see quite clearly here, it looks about right. If you were to take that total sales value divided by the number of unique customers, you should then probably get that as the sales per each of the customers for each of the regions. So there we go. Hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea of some further calculations, different methods of aggregation that you can use when you're working with ChatGPT. Again, please join me for the other tutorials that we're going to be doing on this topic. I will see you there.